Before the art exhibition, Emma heard from Aunt Victoria that Paris was overflowing with wealthy collectors, and opportunities were everywhere. Even street artists could become millionaires overnight if they caught the right patron's eye. Emma was practically drooling, ready to abandon her mediocre art degree, hop on the next flight to France, and seduce some billionaire collector into funding her brilliant career. But I made the biggest mistake of my life. I convinced our parents to stop her. Emma's too young, I'd argued. She needs to finish college first, build a real portfolio. Victoria's just filling her head with fantasies. How naive I was, how stupidly, tragically naive. Because 3 months later, Emma got her revenge in the most spectacular way possible. She didn't just steal my boyfriend, she stole my entire life. My art scholarship to the Parisian Academy, my exhibition space, even my identity documents. Then, she locked me in my own studio and set it ablaze, watching through the window as I screamed her name. The last thing I saw was her wearing my acceptance letter like a victory banner, boarding a plane to Paris with my future tucked under her arm. But somehow, I was back. Back in our cramped apartment in Queens, listening to Victoria's theatrical voice drift up from the kitchen. "Darling Emma, you simply must see the photographs I brought from Montmartre. The art scene is absolutely intoxicating." I checked my phone, March 10th, 2023. 3 months before Emma would destroy everything I'd worked for. 3 months before, she'd convinced my fiancé Oliver that I was mentally unstable and needed to be handled carefully. 3 months before my own family would choose her over me without hesitation. This time, things would be different. This time, I wouldn't stop her from going to Paris. This time, I'd make sure they all went together. Downstairs, the scene was exactly as I remembered, but now it looked different through the lens of betrayal. Emma sat cross-legged on our lumpy couch, practically vibrating with excitement as Victoria spread glossy photographs across our coffee table like tarot cards revealing a golden future. "Look at this gallery space," Victoria purred, her French accent thicker than usual when she wanted something. "The owner is absolutely desperate for fresh American talent. Young, beautiful artists especially." She shot a meaningful look at Emma, who preened like a peacock. Our parents flanked Victoria like eager disciples. Mum clutched her wine glass so tightly I was surprised it didn't shatter, while Dad leaned forward with the hungry expression of a man who'd spent 40 years in middle management dreaming of something more. "How much money are we talking about exactly?" Dad asked, not even trying to hide his greed. Victoria's smile was razor sharp. "My last protégée sold her first piece for 50,000 euros. That was just the beginning." Emma gasped dramatically. 50,000? Jennifer, did you hear that? I forced myself to look interested instead of nauseous. In my previous life, that protégé story had been the hook that reeled Emma in completely. Later, I'd discovered Victoria that had been talking about a sculpture that took 8 years to sell, and only fetched that price because the artist died tragically young. "That sounds incredible," I said, injecting just the right amount of awe into my voice. "Emma, you should totally go." The room went dead silent. Emma's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What?" "I said you should go to Paris with Victoria." I smiled widely, the same innocent smile Emma had given me countless times while plotting my downfall. "It sounds like an amazing opportunity." Mum set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. "Jennifer, honey, are you feeling all right? Last week, you were practically in tears begging us not to let Emma drop out of school." In my past life, I'd fought tooth and nail against this plan. I'd presented research about art school scams, shown them statistics about Americans who got stranded abroad, even threatened to call the university's international programs office to verify Victoria's claims. All it had done was delay the inevitable and earn me Emma's eternal hatred. "I've been thinking about it," I said carefully, "and maybe I was just jealous. Emma's always been the artistic one in the family. The words tasted like poison, but I forced them out with a grateful smile. Emma's suspicion deepened. She knew me too well, or thought she did. Since when do you think I'm more artistic than you? Come on, Em. You've always been better at people stuff, networking, charming gallery owners, making connections. I gestured at the photographs. Look how Victoria responds to you versus me. It was true, unfortunately. Victoria had barely glanced at me since arriving, all her attention focused on Emma's bubbly personality and Instagram-ready face. In my past life, I'd assumed it was because Emma was more outgoing. Now I understood it was because Victoria needed someone easily manipulated, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. Someone expendable. Victoria's eyes lit up. Jennifer, darling, how mature of you to recognise your sister's natural gifts. Not everyone has what it takes to succeed in the Parisian art world. It requires a certain sophistication. The insult was delivered with a sweet smile, just like always. In my previous life, those casual put-downs had eaten away at my self-confidence until I'd barely been able to hold a paintbrush steady. Now, they just confirmed what I already knew. Victoria was a predator who preyed on young women's dreams. Exactly, I agreed enthusiastically. Emma has that natural charisma you need for the international scene. I'd probably just embarrass everyone with my, social awkwardness. Dad nodded approvingly. It's good that you're being realistic, sweetheart. Emma's always been the star of the family. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away, even though I'd heard those exact words before. Growing up, Emma had been the golden child. Prettier, more popular, supposedly more talented. I'd been the awkward older sister, always trying to prove myself worthy of equal treatment. So, it's settled then, Victoria clapped her hands together. Emma will need to move quickly. I have connections expecting us next month. Next month? Mum looked worried. But Emma's in the middle of her semester. Community college, Victoria waved dismissively. She can always finish that later if the Paris thing doesn't work out, though I have every confidence it will. Emma was practically bouncing in her seat. Oh my God, Jennifer, I can't believe you're being so cool about this. I was totally prepared to fight you on it. Why would I fight it? This is your dream come true. I reached over and squeezed her hand, fighting the urge to squeeze harder. I just want you to be happy, Em. And I did want her to be happy, right up until the moment reality came crashing down around her. Because unlike my past life, this time I knew exactly what Victoria's opportunities really were. I knew about the dingy apartment she'd warehouse Emma in, the gallery owners who'd expect special favours for even considering her work, the mounting debts she'd accrue while chasing phantom collectors who never quite materialised. Most importantly, I knew about the contract Victoria would have Emma sign, the one that gave Victoria power of attorney over Emma's finances and legal decisions, the one Emma would be too excited to read carefully. We should celebrate, I announced, standing up. This calls for champagne, the good stuff. Dad raised his eyebrows. Jennifer, that's $50 a bottle. Emma's going to Paris, Dad. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. I headed toward the kitchen, calling over my shoulder. Besides, once she starts selling paintings for €50,000, she can pay us back 1,000 times over. In the kitchen, I allowed myself one moment of vicious satisfaction. They had no idea what they were walking into. Victoria's art program was nothing more than an elaborate trafficking scheme, dressed up in bohemian fantasies. Young American women disappeared into her network regularly, their families receiving cheerful postcards until the money stopped coming and the communication ceased entirely. In my past life, I'd tried to save Emma from that fate. I'd researched Victoria's background, discovered the trail of missing women, even contacted other families who'd lost daughters to similar schemes. No one had listened. Emma accused me of jealousy, my parents accused me of sabotage, and Victoria convinced them all that I was mentally unstable. This time, I wouldn't try to save anyone. This time, I'd serve them up on a silver platter and watch as their greed led them straight into the trap they deserved. Popping the champagne cork, I smiled genuinely for the first time in months. After all, Emma had always said she wanted to be the star of the family. Now she'd get her chance to shine in ways she'd never imagined. The champagne was still fizzing in our glasses when Victoria dropped her first demand. Of course, we'll need some initial investment, just to cover Emma's portfolio development, professional headshots, and the registration fees for the gallery circuits. Dad nearly choked on his drink. How much are we talking about? Nothing excessive, perhaps 15,000 to start. Victoria's tone was casual, like she was discussing the weather rather than our family's entire savings account. Mum's face went white. Victoria, we don't have that kind of money just lying around. Oh, but you do, Victoria smiled sweetly. Jennifer's college fund, for instance. Since she's being so mature about staying behind, surely she wouldn't mind investing in her sister's future. All eyes turned to me. In my past life, I'd fought this tooth and nail, threatening to withdraw every penny before letting them touch my college savings. The fund I'd built through years of part-time jobs, scholarship applications, and birthday money carefully hoarded since childhood. That's actually a great idea, I said, watching Emma's jaw drop in shock. I mean, if Emma makes it big in Paris, she could probably pay for both our educations, right? Jennifer, are you sure? Emma's voice was small, uncertain. For just a moment, she looked like the little sister who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Then I remembered her face in the window, watching me burn alive, and my resolve hardened. I'm positive. Family first, right? I raised my glass in a toast. To Emma's success. Victoria's eyes glittered with satisfaction as she clinked her glass against mine. How wonderfully supportive. This is exactly the kind of family unity that breeds success. The next week passed in a blur of preparations. Victoria had Emma running all over the city. Passport photos, visa applications, shopping for appropriate Parisian attire that somehow required maxing out Dad's credit cards. I watched it all with detached fascination, like observing insects in a terrarium. Jennifer, you're being weirdly calm about this, Emma said one evening, finding me painting in my studio. She was wearing one of her new Parisian outfits, a ridiculously expensive beret and striped shirt that made her look like a tourist costume. Why wouldn't I be calm? I didn't look up from my canvas. You're living your dream. But this was your dream too. The art school in Paris, remember? You had that whole 5-year plan mapped out. I finally met her eyes. Dreams change, Emma. Maybe mine were too small anyway. She frowned, clearly unsettled by my response. In our past life, she'd been able to predict my reactions, use my emotions against me. This new calm was throwing her off balance. Victoria wants to meet with you tomorrow, she said eventually. Something about finalising the arrangements. Of course she does. The meeting was at an upscale cafe in Manhattan, the kind of place Victoria loved for its performative sophistication. She was already there when I arrived, typing furiously on her phone with perfectly manicured nails. Jennifer, darling, sit down. She didn't look up immediately. I wanted to discuss something delicate. I waited, sipping the overpriced coffee I'd ordered. I have been thinking about your situation. Here you are, sacrificing your own dreams for your sister's success. It's quite noble, really. Thank you. But I worry you might be developing some resentment. It would be perfectly natural, of course. All that money going to Emma's future instead of your own. Here it was. Victoria was testing me, probing for weakness she could exploit later. In my past life, this conversation had been the beginning of her campaign to isolate Emma from me entirely. Actually, I've been thinking about that too, I said carefully. And I've decided to join a local art collective here in New York. Nothing as glamorous as Paris, but it'll keep me busy while Emma's away. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. How quaint. Though I hope you won't be too distracted to stay in touch with Emma. She'll need family support during the adjustment period. Of course, we'll video chat all the time. Actually, that might not be possible initially. The program is quite intensive, and the time difference. Victoria waved her hand vaguely. Better to let her focus completely on her art for the first few months. I nodded as if this made perfect sense, though my stomach churned with the remembered fear. This was how it started, the gradual cutting of all communication ties. In my previous life, Emma's calls had become shorter and less frequent until they stopped entirely. The few times I'd managed to reach her, she'd sounded strange, distant, like she was reading from a script. That makes sense. Total immersion is probably best. Victoria looked pleased. Exactly. I'm so glad you understand. Some families can be clingy. It really hampers the artistic process. We finished our coffee making small talk about Emma's itinerary. Victoria mentioned a few gallery names I recognised from my previous research, legitimate businesses that had no connection to her actual operations. It was all window dressing, a beautiful facade hiding something rotten underneath. Oh, one more thing, Victoria said as we prepared to leave. Emma mentioned you have some paintings stored at home. I'd love to take a look, perhaps include one or two in her portfolio. Sister artists, you know, very trendy in the Paris scene right now. My blood ran cold. In my past life, Victoria had made the same request. I'd been flattered, honoured that she'd want to include my work alongside Emma's. Only later did I realise she'd been documenting my style, my techniques, preparing to forge my name on various contracts and legal documents. I'm actually in the middle of reworking most of them. I lied smoothly. They're not really ready for professional viewing yet. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Surely you have something finished. Even a sketch would do. Nothing I'd want representing Emma's artistic family in Paris. First impressions matter so much, don't they? For a moment, Victoria's mask slipped, and I saw something calculating and cold underneath. Then the sweet smile returned. Of course, darling, perfectionism runs in your family, I see. That evening, I found Emma in her room, surrounded by half-packed suitcases and art supplies. She looked up when I knocked, her face bright with excitement. Jen, Victoria says we might leave earlier than planned. Maybe next week instead of next month. That's great, Em. You must be so excited. I am, but... She hesitated, picking at the corner of her sketchbook. I feel weird about taking your college money. Maybe I could pay you back first before spending it on anything else. For a moment, the old Jennifer wanted to surface. The sister who'd protected Emma from bullies, helped her with homework, shared secrets late into the night. The sister who'd believed family meant something. Then I remembered the smell of smoke, the feeling of my lungs filling with superheated air, the sound of Emma's laughter as she walked away from my burning studio. Don't worry about the money, I said softly. Just promise me you'll be careful over there. Paris can be dangerous for young women alone. Emma rolled her eyes. Jennifer, I'll be with Victoria the whole time. She knows everyone, has connections everywhere. What could possibly go wrong? What indeed? I kissed her forehead gently, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo one last time. Nothing, Em. I am sure everything will work out exactly as it should. 3 days later, I stood in JFK Airport, waving goodbye as Emma and Victoria disappeared through security. Emma was practically glowing with excitement, clutching her boarding pass like a winning lottery ticket. Victoria had her arm around Emma's shoulders in a gesture that looked protective but felt possessive. Mum was crying. Dad kept checking his phone, probably calculating how many years it would take to rebuild our drained savings accounts. Grandma Rose was already planning her visit to Paris, convinced Emma would be hosting elaborate gallery parties within months. I was the only one who knew the truth. Emma would send cheerful messages for about 6 weeks. Then the communications would become sporadic, scripted. By month 3, we'd get a single postcard saying she was exploring new opportunities and needed time to focus on her art. After that, silence, but this time I wouldn't spend months frantically searching, calling embassies, hiring private investigators with money I didn't have. This time I wouldn't drive myself to a nervous breakdown trying to save someone who'd chosen this path. This time I'd simply wait. As their plane taxied toward the runway, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to a number I'd memorized in my previous life. Package delivered. Timeline proceeds as discussed. The response came immediately. Confirmed. Payment as agreed. I deleted both messages and walked back to my family with tears in my eyes. Tears they assumed were from sadness, but which were actually from relief. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the waiting. The first month of Emma's absence was exactly as I remembered. A parade of excited phone calls and Instagram posts that painted Paris as a glittering wonderland of artistic opportunity. Emma's social media exploded with photos of cobblestone streets, sidewalk cafes and expensive art supplies Victoria had gifted her. "Look at this studio space Victoria arranged," Emma gushed during our weekly video call, panning her phone around a cramped room with peeling paint and a single grimy window. But the camera angle was clever, hiding the water stains and making the space look bohemian rather than decrepit. "It's perfect for you," I said, noting the dark circles under her eyes that her carefully applied makeup couldn't quite hide. "And the other artists in the programme are amazing. There's this girl, Natasha from Russia, and Pierre from Montreal." "How many people are in the programme, Em?" Her smile flickered. "Oh, it's intimate. Victoria believes in personal attention. Quality over quantity, you know?" I knew. In my past life, I'd eventually tracked down 3 other families whose daughters had joined Victoria's exclusive programmes. None of the girls had ever returned home. By week 6, the calls became shorter. Emma claimed the studio had terrible Wi-Fi, that she was too busy with intensive workshops to chat for long. The Instagram post shifted to fewer selfies, more generic shots of Parisian landmarks that could have been taken by any tourist. "She seems tired," Mum worried after a particularly brief call where Emma had kept glancing off camera as if someone was watching. "It's probably just the adjustment period," I soothed. "Culture shock is real." Dad was more focused on practical concerns. "When is she going to start selling paintings?" Victoria said the gallery connections would happen immediately. I shrugged. These things take time. The art world moves slowly. What I didn't tell them was that I'd been busy during Emma's absence. Using skills I'd learned in my previous life's desperate search, I'd been digging deeper into Victoria's operation. The private investigator I'd hired, paid for with freelance graphic design work I'd picked up, had uncovered a network spanning 3 countries and dozens of missing women. More importantly, I'd made contact with Detective Laurent Dubois of the Paris Police Prefecture. In my past life, he'd been the one officer who'd taken my frantic reports seriously, though by then it had been too late to save Emma. This time, I'd approached him months earlier with a carefully constructed story about my concerns regarding my sister's sudden trip abroad. I'd provided him with Victoria's real name, Vivian Walsh from Cleveland, not the sophisticated Parisian she pretended to be, along with documentation of her previous victims. Dubois had been sceptical at first, but when I'd shown him bank records proving Victoria's pattern of financial exploitation, he'd agreed to keep Emma under discreet surveillance. "Your sister is in what we call a grooming house," he'd explained during our encrypted video call. "They keep the girls comfortable at first, build trust, gradually isolate them from family contact. Then come the debts, the compromising photos, the threats. How long before?" "Usually 3 months. Once they have enough leverage, the girls disappear into the trafficking network. We've been trying to build a case against this organization for years, but we need evidence, someone on the inside. Emma could be that evidence, if she's willing to cooperate when the time comes. But, mademoiselle, you must understand, what you're asking is very dangerous for your sister. I'd met his concerned gaze through the screen without flinching. Emma made her choice, detective. I'm just making sure she faces the consequences. Now, as we entered month 2 of Emma's Parisian adventure, those consequences were beginning to manifest. Her calls became even less frequent, and when she did contact us, Victoria was always hovering nearby, occasionally interjecting with enthusiastic updates about Emma's progress. She's been selected for a very exclusive showcase, Victoria announced during one call, her hand possessively gripping Emma's shoulder. Only the most promising artists get this opportunity. Emma's smile looked painted on. It's going to be amazing. Victoria says there might be some travel involved, visiting collectors in other cities. Other cities? Mum perked up. That sounds exciting. Very exclusive circles, Victoria added smoothly. We might be travelling for several weeks. The Wi-Fi situation could be quite sporadic. I felt a chill of recognition. This was the setup, the excuse for why communication would cease entirely. In my previous life, this had been the last real conversation I'd had with Emma. After this, there had been only stilted postcards and a few obviously scripted text messages. What kind of collectors? I asked innocently. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Private individuals who prefer discretion. The art world can be quite protective of its secrets, you understand. Of course. Emma's lucky to have such exclusive opportunities. After the call ended, Mum was practically vibrating with excitement. Did you hear that? Private collectors. Emma's really making it. Dad was already calculating potential profits. If she impresses the right people, she could be set for life. All those years of art classes finally paying off. Grandma Rose was planning her Paris visit with renewed enthusiasm. I'll wait until after this showcase. Don't want to interrupt when things are going so well. Only I knew that Emma was being packaged for sale like a commodity, that the exclusive showcase was likely an auction where wealthy predators would bid on their preferred victims. The travel would take her far from Paris, possibly to private compounds in Eastern Europe or North Africa where European law enforcement had no jurisdiction. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma's number. Having amazing time, going on art tour for a few weeks. Don't worry if can't call. Love you all. The message was filled with grammatical errors Emma would never make. She'd been an English major before dropping out. Victoria wasn't even trying to maintain the illusion anymore. Within hours, my family's reaction was exactly as I'd predicted. Mum cried with joy at Emma's success. Dad called his friends to brag about his daughter's European art tour, and Grandma Rose immediately booked a flight to Paris for the following month. I can't wait to see Emma's new sophisticated friends, she announced. Victoria said I'd love the cultural scene. My blood froze. Grandma, maybe you should wait until Emma gets back from her tour? Nonsense! Victoria specifically invited me, said Emma's been missing family terribly and would love the surprise. Of course Victoria had. I'd forgotten about this part. How Victoria gradually lured in other family members, especially older women who might have savings or property to exploit. In my previous life, Grandma Rose had disappeared in Paris too, though it had taken 6 months before we'd reported her missing. I think I'll come with you, I announced suddenly. Grandma looked surprised. Really? I thought you weren't interested in travel. I've been thinking about what Victoria said, about seeing the world, experiencing different cultures. Maybe it's time I stopped being such a homebody. The truth was, Detective Dubois had been clear. They needed to catch Victoria's organisation in the act to build a solid case. My family was walking straight into a trap, but this time I'd be there to spring a counter-trap of my own. "We should all go," Mum exclaimed. "A family reunion in Paris. Emma will be so surprised." Dad nodded enthusiastically. "I could take some vacation time. When's the last time we all travelled together?" Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I pulled out my phone and booked 5 tickets to Paris for the following week, using the last of Emma's college fund, naturally. It seemed only fitting that her money would pay for the family's final journey together. That evening, I called Detective Dubois. "They're moving faster than expected," I told him. "My entire family will be in Paris next week." "Mademoiselle, this is very dangerous. If Victoria suspects..." "She won't suspect. She thinks she's playing us perfectly." I stared out my window at the New York skyline, memorizing the view. "Besides, you said you needed evidence. What better evidence than catching them in the act of trafficking an entire American family?" Dubois was quiet for a long moment. "And you're prepared for what this might mean for your family members?" "They made their choices, Detective. Emma chose greed over loyalty. My parents chose her over me. Grandma chose fantasy over reality." My voice was steady, emotionless. "I'm just giving them exactly what they wanted, a chance to join Emma in Paris." "Very well. We'll have units standing by. But remember, once this begins, there's no turning back." "I turned back once before," I said, thinking of my previous life's desperate attempts to save people who'd never appreciated the sacrifice. It was the biggest mistake I ever made. After hanging up, I began packing for Paris. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd finally get my dream trip to the City of Light, just not at all the way I'd once imagined. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, I allowed myself one moment of doubt. Emma was still my sister, despite everything. My parents had raised me, fed me, sheltered me for 18 years. Grandma Rose had taught me to paint, encouraged my artistic dreams when no one else would. But then I remembered the fire, the locked door, Emma's smile as she watched me burn. Some betrayals were too deep for forgiveness, some wounds too raw for healing. In 12 hours, we'd be on a plane to Paris. In 2 days, my family would discover what Emma's exclusive opportunity really entailed, and I'd finally get the revenge I died trying to achieve. The Charles de Gaulle airport smelled exactly like I remembered. Coffee, cigarettes, and the faint trace of expensive perfume that seemed to permeate every corner of Paris. My family emerged from customs, giddy with excitement, clutching their passports like golden tickets to a better life. "I can't believe we're really here," Mum squealed, taking selfies with the airport signs in the background. Dad was already calculating exchange rates on his phone. "The euro's not bad right now. We might actually be able to afford some decent souvenirs." Grandma Rose kept looking around expectantly. "Where's Victoria? She said she'd meet us at the airport." I checked my phone, finding the text I'd been expecting. "Slight delay. Take taxi to hotel. Address attached. Victoria will meet you there this evening. V's assistant." "She's running late," I announced. But she sent the hotel address. The ride through Paris was everything my family had dreamed of. Tree-lined boulevards, historic architecture, sidewalk cafes where impossibly chic people sipped wine in the afternoon sunshine. My parents pressed their faces to the taxi windows like children, pointing excitedly at every landmark. The hotel Victoria had booked was in the 18th arrondissement, far from the tourist areas they'd been expecting. As we pulled up to the narrow building squeezed between a kebab shop and a laundromat, Dad's enthusiasm visibly dimmed. "This doesn't look like the photos on the website," Mum murmured, staring at the cracked facade and iron bars on the ground floor windows. "It's probably more authentic this way," I said cheerfully. "You know how Victoria values genuine Parisian experiences over tourist traps." Our rooms were on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator. The hallways smelled of boiled cabbage and desperation, and our family suite consisted of 2 tiny rooms with paper-thin walls and a shared bathroom down the hall. Well, Grandma Rose said gamely, at least it's atmospheric. That evening, Victoria finally appeared in the hotel lobby, flanked by two men I didn't recognise from my previous life. She looked different somehow, harder, less polished. The mask was slipping now that she had us where she wanted us. "Darling family," she exclaimed, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so sorry about the delay. Business, you understand." "Where's Emma?" Mum asked immediately. "We were hoping to surprise her." About that." Victoria's expression shifted to practice sympathy. "I am afraid there's been a small complication. Emma's showcase has been extended. She's currently with a very important collector in Monaco. Private yacht, very exclusive. No phone service." Dad perked up despite the odd circumstances. "Monaco? That sounds incredibly prestigious." "Oh, it is," Victoria assured him. "But I have wonderful news." The collector was so impressed with Emma that he's interested in meeting her family. He's particularly keen to discuss investment opportunities. One of Victoria's companions stepped forward, a thin man with dead eyes and expensive clothes. "I am Henri. I handle the collector's European interests. He is most eager to meet you all." Grandma Rose beamed. "How exciting! When do we leave?" "Tonight, actually. The collector's schedule is quite demanding." I felt my phone buzz with a text from Detective Dubois. "Team in position. Are you ready?" I typed back quickly. "Give me 10 minutes. "Actually," I said aloud, "I think I should stay behind. I'm not feeling well. Jet lag, you know." Victoria's eyes sharpened instantly. "Nonsense, Jennifer. The collector specifically requested the entire family." "I really think I should rest. I insist." Her voice carried a note of steel that made my parents exchange uncertain glances. Henry moved closer, his hand resting meaningfully on something beneath his jacket. "The cars are waiting outside. We should not keep the collector waiting." This was it, the moment when my family would finally understand what they'd walked into. I pulled out my phone and hit the emergency button Detective Dubois had programmed for me. "Of course," I said sweetly. "I wouldn't want to disappoint such an important collector." The cars were black SUVs with tinted windows, the kind that looked expensive but were actually mobile prisons. As Henri opened the door to the first vehicle, I caught a glimpse of the interior. Reinforced locks, no interior door handles, a partition separating the driver from passengers. "Ladies first," Henri said, gesturing for Mum and Grandma Rose to get in. That's when Mum finally realised something was wrong. "Victoria, this doesn't feel right. Maybe we should go back to the hotel and—" Victoria nodded to Henri, who grabbed Mum's arm with practised efficiency. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Linda. You see, you've already invested so much in Emma's success. It would be a shame to waste that investment." Dad stepped forward, finally showing some backbone. "Let go of my wife." The second man, built like a bouncer, materialised beside Dad, pressing something against his ribs that made him gasp and double over. "Get in the car, old man." Grandma Rose was crying now, finally understanding that this wasn't the sophisticated art world adventure she'd been promised. "Where's Emma? What have you done with Emma?" Victoria's mask dropped completely, revealing the cold predator underneath. "Emma is exactly where she belongs, earning back everything your family owes me. Do you have any idea how much money I've invested in her? The housing, the food, the clothes, the art supplies? She has a debt to work off." "What kind of work?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "The kind that pays very well in certain circles. Emma's been quite popular, actually. Young, American, artistic, very exotic to our clientele." Mum let out a strangled sob, and Dad looked like he might vomit. Even now, in the face of undeniable truth, they couldn't quite process what Emma had become. "But don't worry," Victoria continued conversationally. "You'll be reunited soon. The collector has very specific tastes. He enjoys family experiences. Multi-generational arrangements are particularly lucrative. That's when the sirens started wailing. Police cars rounded the corner from 3 directions, surrounding us with the precision of a military operation. Detective Dubois emerged from the lead car with a bullhorn, shouting commands in rapid French. Victoria's face went white with rage as she realized she'd been trapped. "You," she snarled, whirling on me. "You set us up." "Did I?" I asked innocently. I thought we were just a loving family, eager to support Emma's artistic dreams. Henri reached for his weapon, but found himself staring down the barrels of 6 police rifles. The surrender was swift and decisive. Criminals like Victoria's organisation survived by avoiding exactly this kind of attention. As the police led Victoria away in handcuffs, she turned back to scream at me, "Your sister is already gone. You think this changes anything? Emma's been sold 3 times over. She's property now." My family stood in shock, finally understanding the full scope of what they'd walked into. Mum was hyperventilating. Dad looked 10 years older, and Grandma Rose kept repeating, "I don't understand," like a broken record. Detective Dubois approached me with a grim expression. "We found your sister. She's alive, but..." He paused delicately. "It will be a long recovery." "Where is she?" "A private compound outside of Marseille. The medical team is with her now." His voice softened slightly. "She may not be the same person you remember." I nodded, feeling nothing but a strange emptiness where my anger used to live. "Can I see her?" "Eventually. Right now, she needs medical attention and psychological evaluation." An hour later, we were at the police station giving statements. My family sat in a row of plastic chairs, looking shell-shocked and broken. They'd finally gotten their trip to Paris, their brush with sophistication and culture. It just wasn't quite what they'd imagined. "Why?" Mum whispered when the police finished taking her statement. "Why didn't you stop this?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. This woman who'd raised me, who'd claimed to love me, who'd chosen Emma over me at every opportunity, who'd drained my college fund without a second thought, who'd celebrated my sister's success while ignoring my sacrifice. "I tried to stop it once before," I said quietly. "You called me jealous, vindictive, mentally unstable. You chose Emma's dreams over my concerns, her happiness over my warnings." Dad leaned forward, his face haggard. "But Jennifer, we're family. Family protects family." "You're right, Dad. Family should protect family." I stood up, gathering my things. "That's exactly what I did." "What do you mean?" I looked down at the 3 people who'd shaped my entire life, who'd taught me that love was conditional and loyalty was a one-way street. I protected myself. For once in my life, I chose me over Emma. Grandma Rose was crying again. "But what happens to us now? How do we go home? How do we face people?" "I suppose you'll figure it out. You're very resourceful when you want something badly enough." As I walked toward the exit, Mum called after me desperately, "Jennifer, wait. We need to stick together. We need to help Emma." I paused at the door, my hand on the handle. Emma made her choice when she locked me in that burning studio. You made yours when you chose her over me. I'm just making mine now. What choice? I turned back one last time, seeing them clearly for what they were. Not family, but strangers who happened to share my DNA. People who'd love me only as long as I was useful, who'd sacrifice me the moment it benefited them. I'm choosing to live. 6 months later, I was back in New York, running a successful graphic design business from a studio apartment in Brooklyn. Emma had been repatriated and was in a long-term care facility upstate, slowly rebuilding her shattered psyche with the help of trauma specialists. She'd asked to see me once. I'd declined. My parents had returned to Queens with their savings depleted and their reputations in ruins. Dad had lost his job when his employer discovered he'd lied about taking vacation time for a family emergency. Mum had fallen into a deep depression that left her barely functional. Grandma Rose had moved in with my aunt in Florida, too ashamed to face her old friends. None of them had contacted me since Paris. I'd changed my phone number and email address just to be sure. Some people might call what I did cruel, unforgiving. They might say family should always forgive, that blood is thicker than water. But those people have never burned alive while their sister watched. They've never been betrayed so completely that death seemed preferable to living with the knowledge of it. I'd given my family exactly what they wanted, a chance to join Emma in pursuing their dreams abroad. The fact that those dreams turned into nightmares wasn't my responsibility. I'd learned something valuable in my second life. Revenge isn't about making people suffer. It's about finally being free from the people who've been making you suffer all along. As I painted in my new studio, watching the sun set over Manhattan, I smiled for the first time in 2 lifetimes. Emma had always said she wanted to be the star of the family. Mission accomplished.